Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum class. Today we are going to be studying another topic of neurological physical therapy. I am your course instructor, Dr. Gulab Fatma, Assistant Professor, Department of Health Sciences, University of South Asia. So, as you all know, I am your course instructor for the subject of neurological physical therapy. So, in another lecture of neurological physical therapy, today we are going to study about the recovery of the function. So the basic topics for today are recovery of the functions, what is meant by function induced recovery, what is cortical remapping, what is the constraint induced movement therapy, and task specific locomotion training. So, the topics we'll be discussing will make you understand what are the different mechanisms by which brain can repair itself and heal itself and can restore its function. So, this is the basic theme of today's lecture. That what are the different mechanisms through which your brain can restore its function, lost functions as a result of an injury, and what are the repair mechanisms adapted by the brain. So next is in the same sequence, we will be studying the function-induced recovery and what is the mechanism of function-induced recovery, and then we'll study two basic techniques in function-induced recovery that are constraint-induced movement therapy and body weight sport. So these are the hopefully by the end of this lecture you will be able to understand all these concepts of the how the brain recover itself, what is the importance of function-induced recovery, and what is the usage of CIMT and BWS. So these are the main learning objectives for today's lecture. So coming towards the topic of recovery of the function, what do you mean by recovery? Recovery of function simply means to revert the functions to the pre-injury state, or you can say that we'll try in that how the motor patterns or how the functions that were present before the CN injury, how to reacquire that. This is called recovery of function. So recovery of function, CNS recovery of function is a bit different than your peripheral system or your musculoskeletal system. So CNS have two main types of recovery. One is called the spontaneous recovery and one is called the function-induced recovery. So this is very interesting to know that previously it was thought that brain cannot repair itself and it doesn't have any potential of recovery or repair. But the latest research is totally against this and it totally nullifies this idea. It says that brain do have potential to recover and it do have potential to repair. So how the brain repairs or recovers, this is by two mechanisms. One is called the spontaneous recovery and the other is called the function-induced recovery. Simply, spontaneous recovery is the recovery which will be like your body's own processes will be involved in that recovery, and obviously it will take place by the body's own mechanism of repair. Your body is an extraordinarily excellent type of machinery that has an immense power and immense mechanisms to recover itself. इससे वो बात आ जाती है एहसन तकवीम वाली, that is it is a machinery that if you are patient is if a person is alive for the 100 years, so the machinery is automatically repairing itself most of the time, and there are very rare occasions that we need some external help to repair our this machinery. Otherwise, it itself has mechanism to recover itself. So one type of recovery is spontaneous recovery, that their body's own mechanism are involved in that recovery, and the other is function-induced recovery. Function-induced recovery is, as the name indicates, this is a kind of recovery that results as a result of some function performed. So this is the main domain, function induced recovery, where the role of the physiotherapist work, because this is your now duty to make the patient exercise and make the patient work and make the patient do some kind of activities that will lead to the function induced recovery in the brain, and there will be like recovery of the brain, which is called function induced recovery. So there are two types of recoveries. One again, spontaneous recovery, and the other is function-induced recovery. The function-induced recovery is the main tool of a physiotherapist and the main power of the physiotherapist, which is his ground, where he can work and he can help such patients who have some kind of CNS injury. Okay, in case when both of these recoveries are not sufficient to recover, sometimes the function is recovered fully, but in certain cases the function is not recovered fully. Then again there is a mechanism which is called compensation. So if the recovery is not there, then the mechanism of compensation comes there, and the new pattern, motor pattern, will evolve, and there will be obviously the patient will either adapt the previous movement in a new manner by using the remaining motor elements, or it can totally use some different alternative motor strategy. Like, as you know, the patient, hemiplegic patient whose recovery is not complete and hands are not working, the patient will start to perform all the activities with the other side of the body. So that is the way how the patient compensate, and how much compensation can be there, that the even people can write with their food. So compensation can be that much extensive. So there are new motor patterns, either the adaptation of remaining motor patterns, only the same, it means that either the same limb can be used in a new mechanism and there is new motor pattern, or simply different alternative motor strategies can be adapted, and that is called like compensation. An alternative motor strategy will be performed, and all movements will be performed but in a new manner. Like, patient is walking, but the gait pattern is very different from the previous one, but the patient is walking, is performing the function. So this is the compensation. Now how, if the recovery is not possible, then the compensation comes, and the patient tries to perform that same function by alternate motor strategies, and the function is still performed. So now we'll be discussing the spontaneous recovery and if its mechanisms in detail. So then, simply these are spontaneous recovery. You can say we have already discussed, if you remember, about the spinal shock and cerebral shock. That initially, when there is an injury, the CNS is in a condition of shock, and the reason behind that is that there is edema, there is blockage, there is disruption of the normal neurotransmitters transmission, and the normal neuronal nerve transmission is disturbed. The area, the blood flow to that area is reduced. All that leads to a condition in which the areas which are the one area that is injured, but the areas that are adjacent to that and that are remote to the injured area, that also stop working due to this shock condition. But as the time passes and as this acute situation is settling down, then there is a removal of edema and blood flow is restored to the areas which are not actually injured. So when the result, they like start working again, there is function restoration. So this is an example of spontaneous recovery, and this type of spontaneous recovery is called diastasis. In diastasis, this is initial spontaneous recovery that takes place by itself, that occurs over a relatively very short period of time, like typically within 3 to 4 weeks, the edema will be resolved. And actually this type of recovery is due to the function of return of the function of undamaged parts of them that was not actually damaged. So that's why initially you will see a very rapid recovery, and the patient feels that he is going to be normal in a very few days, but that initial recovery and the initial speed is not maintained for a long time, because that is only due to the recovery of the parts that was actually not damaged initially, and only this was due to recovery of the cerebral shock and spinal shock, that the patient has a very speedy recovery in the start, few days and month. But after that, the actual repair process of the parts of the brain that are actually injured, that is a bit slower recovery, and it may take time, and which differs from person to person and from area to area. So there is a term which is called neuroplasticity. Now this is the case where the areas of the brain which have like injury, which have the insult itself. So neuroplasticity, the most simple definition is the ability of the brain to change and repair itself is neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is a very new concept, and a lot of research is going on this subject, that how the different mechanisms are adopted and how neuroplasticity helps the brain to repair itself. So neuroplasticity denies all the previous concept that brain cannot repair itself. Neuroplasticity says that the brain has the ability to change and repair itself. So how the process of neuroplasticity takes place? There are basically, we can divide into three basic processes. One is called neuroanatomical, where the changes at the anatomical level are there, neurochemical, or neurodestructive changes. We can divide it into three type of changes. So we'll discuss these changes one by one. First of all, coming towards the anatomical changes. So anatomical changes, they include nerve growth, actual nerve growth and activation of the brain areas which were previously not active. So if you remember that time and again हम ये बात सुनते हैं कि इंसान अपनी पूरी जिंदगी में अपने ब्रेन का 10 से 20% इस्तेमाल कर पाता है. It means there are many brain areas which are not active, that are like dormant in normal living. So those areas of the brain can be activated and that participate, and they can help us to restore the function. So anatomical change first, it includes the neural growth, which is called neural regeneration, and the other is that those areas of the brain or those pathway which was previously redundant and that were not used for the transmission of nerve impulses, those will be becoming active. So one is you can the how the regeneration takes place. Actually, there are certain molecules which can we also in the chemical changes. There are some molecules which are called the trophic molecules, nerve growth factors, or sometimes they are called trophic growth factors. Actually, they are simple peptides. They are normally present in the your brain, and they help in the your growth and normal differentiation and normal repair processes of the brain. So trophic molecules are there and they help in the regeneration, and they are actually nerve growth factors. They help to grow the nerve. So these are the trophic molecules which are involved in the repair process. Then another very important mechanism involved in the repair process, that nerve cells, they change the type of interaction they previously had with each other. They change the level of interaction, they change the type of interaction. So these change in interaction, these are the physiological changes or you can say chemical changes that are actually taking place at the level of the synapses, and how this take place, we will be discussing this shortly. First, coming towards the regeneration or how nerve growth. So there are two basic mechanisms. One is called the regenerative synaptogenesis, and the name is very well indicated that we are regenerated, and the injured axon itself, it some part of it sprout and it innervates previously innervated synapses. So, but this kind of regeneration is mostly common called Valerian regeneration. It is common in the peripheral nervous system. In brain, the main major type of synaptogenesis is reactive synaptogenesis, which is also called collateral sprouting, and this is the main mechanism in CNS. And here, the sprouting of the synaptic sides of injured axon takes place. But here the sprouting is of the neighboring axon. The injured axon itself doesn't sprout. The neighboring axons can sprout. Now here you may have question that we say that nerve cell cannot regenerate. So that is the case when your actual cell body is damaged and nucleus is damaged. Then it cannot regenerate. Then we have to rely on that is the case when we have to rely on the compensation on any such mechanism. But if the axon is injured, then there is synaptogenesis, and there is reactive either synaptogenesis or either there is regenerative synaptogenesis. So to make you understand what is meant by regeneration, regeneration means that there are a nerve is cut. This was a normal. This is a normal indication. It is going, and this one is injured. This is a normal situation where the same stump will regenerate, and you have already I hope you have studied that variant regeneration and regeneration of the nerve take place at the rate of 1 millimeter per day. So that is the process taking place here. And if this is not possible for a male, then the supporting from some previous sorry node of Ranvier can sprout, and the same area is innervated again, or some others can be sprouted from other node of Ranvier can be sprouted. So this is regeneration. So reactive sprouting, the main axon, it is difficult to regenerate the main axon. So the neighboring axon, it sprouts. This is normal. It sprouts and it makes synapses and it innervates the area that is denervated as a result of injury. So this mechanism is usually followed in the CNS, and this mechanism is mostly followed in the PNS. This is an other presentation. There is a term which is called rerouting. Rerouting simply means that this was an area where these three of neurons were innervating this. But if one is not terminated, has terminated its path, then the remaining two will perform the mechanism, and one of them will take the major lead. On the other hand, coming towards the sprouting, now look at this. This is the normal condition, neural connection prior to degeneration. Now, due to any reason, this A neuron is unable to innervate with this neuron and make synapses. So the B will sprout and it will innervate this. So मुझे इसके लिए एग्जांपल याद आती है, जैसे घर में अगर फादर की डेथ हो जाए तो जो बड़ा भाई होता है वो जो है फिर सारे बच्चों को संभालने का काम जो है वो ले लेता है. तो यही मैकेनिज्म आपके जो है वो सीएनएस में होता है कि कोई और जो है न्यूरॉन जो है वो ज्यादा फंक्शन जो है वो अपने ऊपर ले लेता है. So the other thing where the very important, this is one, the regeneration, then coming towards the physiological changes, and where there are the chemical changes where the neurotransmitters release and receptor sensitivity is improved. This is called synaptic plasticity, and this is even a very normal process that you know that if you are continuously and repeating stimulating a particular part of the brain in a particular domain of your brain functioning, then that becomes stronger. And how it becomes stronger, this is called long-term potentiation, that if the same neuron and same neural pathway is used again and again, then the neuronal connection lying there becomes stronger and stronger. Even actual in long-term potentiation, there is actual increase in the neurotransmitters, and there is actual increase in the synaptic relations, you can say, or synaptic interaction. So this is actually increase in the synaptic strength, and this is the main mechanism which is underlying all of the memory and all of the learning. ठीक है जी. कैसे आप एक चीज नई नई सीखते हैं, आपको बड़ी डिफिकल्ट लगती है, लेकिन अगर आप उसे करते रहें तो आपके लिए बहुत आसान हो जाती है, और it will be for you just in a matter of seconds. So this is how your memory and your learning is made easy, that the pathway you are using again and again, there are stronger synaptic connections are made. It is called synaptic plasticity, and the term for use for them is called long-term potentiation. And actually the long-term potentiation, how the long-term potentiation takes place, it takes place by repetitive and recent patterns of the activity. जैसे अब इसके एक और एग्जांपल ये है कि आप कोई चीज जो है, जो आप पढ़ते रहोगे, रिवाइज करते रहोगे, आपको याद रहेगी, ठीक है, वो आपको और से पक्की होती जाएगी, और जो चीज आप छोड़ दोगे वो भूल जाएगी. So long-term potentiation, persistent and strength of synapses, it is based on recent pattern of activities. Now this is a graph pictorial presentation of this. Now this is a normal situation. So we have these transmitters and we have these receptors. This is what happens with again and again repetitive use, where receptors are increased and even transmitters are increased. And again you can see that in the last stage, long-term potentiation, there is immense increase in the number of neurotransmitters, and again there is increase in the number of receptors. And so this is the mechanism how a synapses synaptic plasticity or long-term potentiation takes place. To revise this, I am again telling you that brain has the capacity, that the areas of the brain which are used again and again and which are used in a research manner, those area became more strengthened and there is synaptic plasticity, and this is the mechanism through which your learning and memorization takes place, and the things become easy with the repetition and with practice. And same is the case with the functional recovery, that again if a movement and if a pattern is repeated again and again, there will be synaptic plasticity, there will be long-term potentiation, and the movement and that motor pattern will become very very easy. Okay, so after these mechanisms of neuroplasticity, there is an other term which is used, which is called, and this is an again a mechanism of recovery of function used by the brain. This is called cortical remapping. So simply different and those areas of the brain which were not previously utilized, they take over the functions of the damaged tissue. So this is the mechanism, like when the recovery and actually damaged parts are not able to recover that much, say in case the actual cell bodies are damaged, then what is the mechanism used by the brain? Then डिफरेंट बिल्कुल जो बिल्कुल डिफरेंट और बिल्कुल एरियाज जो पहले यूज नहीं होते वो इन एक्शन आ जाएंगे। तो ऐसा समझ पहले घर में जो बच्चा बिल्कुल कोई काम नहीं करता था, अब उसके पास सारी जिम्मेदारी पड़ जाएगी और वो फिर करने लग जाएगा। So there are two mechanisms again here. One is called parallel cortical maps. Parallel cortical maps को आप यूँ समझ लीजिए अबू भी कमाते थे, बड़े भाई भी कमाते थे। तो अब जो है अगर अबू नहीं रहे किसी के तो बड़े भाई जो है वो संभाल लेंगे चीजें। This is called parallel cortical maps. So these are actually there are backup systems that become operational when the primary system breaks down. So in terms of CNS, like you all know that we have a motor area, but we do have a motor associated area. We have a sensory area, and we do have a sensory associated area. So these are if the primary system is not working. And other mechanism is the total substitute. Whole different areas of the brain are capable of becoming reprogrammed. Just I have given you an example that if someone is their upper limbs are not working, and then we do have the potential to even write. आपने videos देखी होंगी कि वो पाँव से लिख लेते हैं. And another thing you have noticed that the persons who are blind, they use their fingers. They can read with their fingers. Actually, the sensitivity of the finger is enhanced to that extent that they can substitute the function of the eyes. So this is called substitution. That whole different areas of brain, they can become reprogrammed. And जो एक आम ज़बान में कहते हैं ना कि ऐसे लोग जो है इस तरह के ब्लाइंड हैं या वो हैं, उनकी बाकी हिस्से बहुत तेज होते हैं, तो ये उसकी तरह के they start to substitute the primary function and whole different areas of brain, they become reprogrammed, and their actual representation in the brain is changed, and they take over the function of those lost parts. Now these were all the basic mechanism underlying function induced recovery, and like if I want to revise all these concepts with you people, I will like to tell you again that in function induced recovery, brain has different mechanism to first of all repair itself, and there is in the start there is a very fast recovery that is simply by like removing the acute, moving out of the acute state. There is very fast recovery that is called diastasis. After that, if recovery, there are two types of main recovery. One is called the spontaneous recovery, which is actually taking place by the actual mechanism taking place within your body and within your CNS and your central nervous system. And then we have function induced recovery. So we are we have covered the first part of it, that was spontaneous recovery, and we studied that in spontaneous recovery there is mainly the neuroplasticity. After diastasis we have neuroplasticity, and neuroplasticity can be through neuroanatomical changes, there can be neurochemical changes, there can be neuro physiological changes, or there you can say the synapses rerouting or synaptic plasticity. So we discussed that nerve growth have the ability to grow again, and we have trophic molecules for that. Then it has the ability, brain has the ability of cortical remapping, that different and previously underutilized areas of the brain become functional. Or we have the ability to long-term potentiation, where the synaptic connections are very made stronger, and using these many areas of the brain which was not previously active, they become active. And there is either there is regenerative synaptogenesis, or there can be reactive synaptogenesis. So the brain can function in terms of these activities, and it has the ability to restore its function. And all this is a type of spontaneous recovery. And spontaneous recovery, after spontaneous recovery we are going to discuss now function induced recovery. As I have already discussed, that function induced recovery is the main tool of a physiotherapist, because this is the type of recovery that takes place as a result of activity, and as a result of putting demand on the activity. So the very a common example from musculoskeletal system we can take, that if you will be overloading the muscles in the resistive exercises, only then your muscles will become stronger, and they will gain the bulk, and they will gain the strength. So just like that, we can the bodybuilders build their body by calling the muscles to action, and by performing some function with those muscles. Only this is the only method you can strengthen your body. So same is the case with brain, that if you will make that part of the brain function, and if you will make that any part of the body, like in instance अल्लाह ताला की बड़ी मेहरबानी है कि हम लोग अपनी बॉडी के जिस पार्ट को ज्यादा यूज करेंगे वो स्ट्रांग होता जाएगा, वो मसल स्ट्रांग होते जाएंगे, वो बाइसेप को यूज करेंगे, बाइसेप स्ट्रांग हो जाएंगे, उनका बल्क बन जाएगा। ब्रेन के जिस डोमेन को ज्यादा यूज करेंगे वो स्ट्रांग हो जाएगा। आप मैथ्स पढ़ना चाहते हैं, आप मैथ्स की प्रैक्टिस करना शुरू हो जाए, आप कुछ ऐसे मैथ्स के मास्टर बन जाएंगे। जिस डोमेन में आप मास्टर बनना चाहते हैं, आप सिर्फ उसको पढ़ना शुरू कर दें, प्रैक्टिस शुरू कर दें, आप उस चीज के मास्टर बन जाएंगे। सो दिस इज सेम इज द केस विद फंक्शन इंड्यूस्ड रिकवरी, that if you want your patient to move and to perform certain activity, you have to make him work and perform that activity. So function induced recovery is your ability of your nervous system to modify itself. And how it modifies itself? It modifies itself in response to any changing activity, challenging activity, or there is a challenging environment that will make your nervous system to modify itself. So now I am going to discuss two main examples of function-induced recovery that are used in neurological patients, and obviously along with that, challenging environment will be provided. And things challenging. What do you mean by challenging environment? Like in the start, if the patient was performing a particular activity within the your clinic, then in next level you will ask the patient to perform the activity in corridor, in the next level in the house, in the very next level in community mobility will come there. So this is how a challenging environment is built up. So coming towards the function-induced recovery, we are going to discuss two basic techniques. One is called constraint-induced movement therapy, and other is called task-specific locomotion training. So coming towards the constraint-induced movement therapy, this is a form of therapy. As you can understand by the word constraint, constraint means to block something or to stop something. So constraint-induced movement therapy, actually this is a treatment regime, or you can say this is a rehabilitation therapy which is actually designed for the upper extremity, especially for the stroke patients. And simply what is the basic concept of this therapy, that normally this is very convenient for a patient who is hemiplegic, that if this arm is not working, he will start to perform his normal daily activities with the opposite hand. Like if right is not working, it will be very convenient for me to shift the, and we do have the substitution and we have the compensation. I will like to perform those activities with the left hand because this will be convenient for me. But the concept of this therapy is that you have to this substitution will make this limb more weak, because the patient will stop using it, because he has to put effort and he has to suffer when he will be using this limb. So he will stop using this limb. This is also called unilateral neglect, or sometimes like he will even neglect that he is a part which is not working. He starts performing all the functions with the normal hand. So the purpose of this therapy is that you will constrain and you will block the normal limb and make the patient perform all the activities through the affected limb. So this is the basic purpose of this therapy. This rehabilitation program is specific for upper limb, and this is specific for the stroke patient, or whenever there is a unilateral limb is affected. So this is specific for them. And moreover, obviously this therapy can only be performed if the patient have that much of muscle power that it can like perform those activities. This will you can only adapt this activity at that stage of recovery, when the patient have some power in the muscles. So I have already told you that the main concept is that you will block the unaffected limb and you will make the patient to work with the affected limb intensely work. And uninvolved limb is either placed in a mitt or sling or supinely, and you will block it. You will actually block it. The patient will not be able to use it. So in the start, and the activities should be supervised, and you should look that patient is using the affected hand, and then by repetitive use of affected hand, as we have already discussed, the function and use recovery will take place, and this limb will become more powerful. Now this is an example. Now this patient has like, as I can see here, right sided is affected, and this side, which is like placed in the mid, this is actually the affected side. So the affected side is placed in the mid, and she is not able to use her sorry, the normal side is placed in the mid, and she is not able to use the normal side, and she is using her affected side to perform. In a start, we can give very simple activities, just like cutting with the knife, pouring water in a cup of from one cup to another cup, playing some simple games, and like jotting down some points. Very simple activities can be performed in the initial levels, and in the next level you can transform towards some, like you can give some blocks, and this doesn't matter what kind of activities, but the patient should concentrate, and patient should use the affected limb. So in initially you should supervise and see that patient is using the affected limb, and when the sufficient strength is gained, then activity level of activity can be increased and patient can perform the activities himself. So basically, there are three components of CIEMT. One is the repetition, repetition. So performing the activity again and again and again. The structure means that there is a particular structure, and the same activity is performed again and again and again till masters. And then it needs an intense practice. That majority of the day, patient should be using the affected arm rather than using the unaffected arm, or less affected arm. Then the second part is to restrain the use of the less affected arm by any supplant or by any mitt, and then monitor the arm use in normal daily life, like doing buttons and combing. In the next level, we can add up different problem solving and life situations, so that patient, along with the functional training, the ADL training is also added there. So this was the first technique. The second technique is task-specific locomotor training. The first CIMT was for the upper limb, and task-specific locomotor training is for the lower limb. Here, it is the basic mechanism that you have like I hopefully you have seen such harness. This harness helps to take up the body weight initially, and the patient will be standing, and the weight of the body is according to the patient tolerance. The weight of the body allowed is according to the patient tolerance, and the patient here the patient will be bearing weight to the legs, and only the weight the patient is able to bear. Rest of the weight will be tackled by this harness and this body weight force. So along with that, you will make the patient walk, and if the patient is having difficulty in proper walking, then you can guide the steps and you can provide the assistance in very initial stages. But it will give the patient confidence that he can stand in the later stages of life, and moreover you can perform the gait training, and the patient will not forget those sorry, patient will not forget those motor patterns. So this is the body weight sport is the mechanism which is used in the rehabilitation of the lower limb, and then gradually with the recovery, with the increase in the strength of the muscles of the lower limb and legs, the more and more gradually the weight is added and the assistance is reduced. So this is the mechanism how we can train a patient with the help of this is the simple. Either we can use this harness on simple, or we can use a treadmill. On a treadmill, the patient is made to walk on a treadmill, and hence the gait training can be performed. And along with that, this is not only it enhances the confidence of the patient, but it also trains your muscle, all the stabilizers, all the fixators, all the agonists and antagonists that will be working in the pattern which is used in the normal gait pattern. So this is the benefit of the functional. So this will lead to the functional induced recovery as the mechanism of normal gait pattern will be developed. So this is the mechanism where you can use this thing, and gradually you will challenge the patient more and more by reducing the assistance, by decreasing the amount of loading provided by the body weight sport, and more weight will be handled by the legs itself, and more weight bearing will be beared by the legs uh, in the next stage. So in very next stages, then you will try to make the patient moving on the ground, and in the next in challenging the environment, you will make the patient take the patient towards the community ambulation. So there are two methods to challenge the patient or enhance the difficulty of a task. Either by the modifying the task itself, or by modifying the environment in which it is performed. So you will be using both of these mechanisms to increase the challenging of this activity. So that was all from the lecture today. So the main points we discussed today, the first is that brain has very different mechanisms to repair itself, and in case if a certain particular part is unable to repair, then it has the mechanisms for compensation and for substitution, and cortical remapping is there. So neuroplasticity is a very important aspect of brain repair. Next, the very important thing which can be a source of benefit for the patient is that there is a function induced recovery, and the repetitive activity is performed, it will help in the restoration of function. So being a therapist, function induced recovery is your main tool, one of your main tools. So not only the function induced recovery is good for the restoration of function, but it has many other benefits. Like not only it has positive effect on weight recovery, but it will also train the patient in the normal daily activities, and it will also train the patient in the normal motor patterns. So it has many fold benefits in the function induced recovery, and we discussed two major techniques in that. For the upper limb, we discussed constraint induced movement therapy, and for the in which the normal part of the body is blocked, and patient will be forced, or patient will be made to work with the affected part of the body. And then there is body weight sport, where we use a harness and make the patient stand and make the patient walk, but without weight initially, and then initially gradually the weight taken by the legs is increased. That is another example of function induced recovery, and both of these kind of function training has a very positive effect on pain recovery. So that is all from the lecture today. I hope you people will have found it helpful for you people. So see you in the next lecture.